Okay, so you hear this term net zero absolutely everywhere these days, right? It's this huge, ambitious promise that cities all over the world are making to fight climate change. But what does it really take to go from a catchy headline to an actual real-world plan? Well, today, we're going to go under the hood of the Climate Action Plan for Tshwane, a major city in South Africa, to see exactly how they're trying to pull it off.
And honestly, the best way to think about this whole process, it's like a health checkup. I mean, you wouldn't just start a crazy new fitness routine without seeing a doctor first to see where you're at, would you? Well, it's the exact same idea for a city. Before it can get healthy, it needs a brutally honest look in the mirror at its current climate health. So, here's our game plan. We're going to follow that whole checkup process. We'll start with the big goal, the challenge. Then we'll look at the city's climate X-ray to get the diagnosis. We'll figure out where the emissions are coming from, look at the different treatment plans on the table, and finally, check out the actual prescription the city wrote for itself.
All right, first up, the big, audacious goal. This is kind of like the city standing up and announcing to the world, "Hey everyone, I'm going to run a marathon."
And here it is. By 2050, the city of Tshwane wants to be a net zero carbon city. So what does that actually mean? Well, in simple terms, it means that for any greenhouse gases it's still producing, it has to actively pull that same amount out of the atmosphere. It's a massive long-term promise that's going to shape pretty much every decision from here on out. But, a goal without a plan is just a wish. And any good plan has to start with a really accurate diagnosis.
So how do you diagnose a city? I mean, you can't just put a stethoscope on City Hall and ask it to cough. You need cold, hard data. You got to run some tests to see what's really going on underneath it all.
And the main diagnostic tool for this job is something called a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Just think of it like the city's version of a full-body MRI or a complete set of blood tests. It's a super detailed report that measures exactly what kinds of greenhouse gases are being pumped out, and this is the most important part, where they're all coming from. This inventory is absolutely the first, most crucial step.
So really, this inventory does three vital things. First, it diagnoses the scale of the problem. Just how bad is it? Second, it identifies the problem areas, the specific sectors that are causing the most trouble. And third, it establishes a baseline. It gives the city that "you are here" marker on the map, so it can actually measure if it's making any real progress down the line.
Okay, so the lab results are back. Let's take a look at what Tshwane's climate X-ray actually found.
Whoa, okay. The top-line number is pretty staggering. In its baseline year, the city pumped out 19.5 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. That equivalent part is just a way of lumping all the different greenhouse gases together into one number. But yeah, it's a massive, massive figure. So what does it actually break down to?
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. A giant number doesn't tell you the whole story. When you break it down, you find the main culprits. And look at this, a whopping 61% comes from something called stationary energy. That's basically the power for buildings, for industry, for construction, the whole shebang. Then you have transport at 21% and waste at 18%. Bam, right there. That's your diagnosis in 3 parts.
To try and make that giant number feel a bit more real, let's put it in perspective. It breaks down to about 6.4 tons of CO2 equivalent for every single person living in the city, every single year. When you think about it on that personal level, you really start to feel the scale of the challenge they're facing.
Okay, so with a clear diagnosis in hand, it's time for the doctors, or in this case, the city planners, to lay out the different treatment options. And they modeled 3 very different futures for Tshwane.
And wow, the choices could not be more stark. The first option, business as usual, is basically like no treatment at all. If the city does nothing, its emissions are projected to increase by a massive 67% by 2050. Yikes. The second option is like taking some vitamins. It includes actions already planned and gets you a 20% decrease. Better, but not great. But then there's the third option, ambitious action. This is the full lifestyle overhaul, and it's the only one that really moves the needle, aiming for a huge 76% cut.
So, faced with those 3 possible futures, the city had to write its prescription. And, not surprisingly, it chose the only one that could actually get the job done, the full-on, ambitious lifestyle change. So this is what that prescription looks like. It's a real roadmap with clear, measurable goals. A 15% cut by 2030, a 45% cut by 2040, and then hitting that 100% net zero target by 2050.
And this plan means fundamentally redesigning city life. We're talking huge investments in clean public transit, retrofitting buildings to be way more efficient, and completely overhauling how they handle waste. But like with any major treatment plan, there's a big complication.
And here's the catch. It's a big one. Remember that 61% of emissions came from energy? Well, the biggest chunk of that is just the electricity grid. But here's the thing. The city doesn't control its own power supply. That's managed at the national level. And South Africa's national grid is still heavily dependent on fossil fuels. This means our patient, the city, can't heal its biggest wound all by itself. Its success is completely tied to working with the national government to clean up the country's entire energy supply.
And that leaves us with a final critical question. Tshwane has its health checkup, it's got the diagnosis, and it's written the prescription. But this whole case highlights a fundamental challenge that cities everywhere are facing. When the core of the problem, like an entire nation's power grid, is outside of your direct control, how much can a single city truly achieve on its own? That's the question that dedicated city planners all over the world are grappling with right now.